What's the scariest story you know of with actual photographic proof? Is a series of photos recovered from the camera of a Canadian couple who died during the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. It shows the water level flowing out from the shore before surging back in. The very idea of a wall of water crashing towards you, completely unstoppable, and you have nowhere to run, nowhere that is safe, is perhaps one of the most terrifying things that could happen to you. By the time one could take these photos, all you can do is watch death march inexorably towards you. This reminds me of Robert Landsberg, the photographer who was near Mount St. Helens when it erupted, knew he was fucked and took as many pictures as he could, then used his body to protect his equipment from the pyroclastic flow. Seriously badass. Volcanologists statistically have the shortest lifespan of the geologists. Oftentimes the career of a geologist will plateau, and that is okay to say that, since it's the highest form of flattery. Probably the Delphi murders, where the girls took a photo and recorded audio, video of the killer. Still hasn't been caught. Sad face. Edit. Oh right, link. This story and everything about it gives me the heebie-jeebies. I've often wondered just how many awful people just camp out along hiking trails, particularly along remote ones, just because of the ease of access to extremely vulnerable people and the low likelihood of any interference, before they do whatever it is they set out to do. There is an old railway road that cuts my old town in half. Looks no different to this. I avoided it like the plague after I went down there one time and a dude just appeared from the bush behind me. As I neared the end of the track, he was right on top of me. He went to grab me and a knife in hand, but a car went by and he just vanished back into the bushes. I stay away from remote walkways when I'm on my own now. Never know, like you said, who is camping out. Edit. Lots of people asking if I reported it. I had reported it following the event. I phoned my parents first. Weirdly, they picked me up from the nearby petrol station. We contacted the police and they came round, took details of the event, etc. Police never found or caught anyone. I do remember police being more present around the area for a long while after. Especially around the finishing school times. Fuck. I've grown up in the countryside and regularly used to go on walks alone at night through fairly remote areas. A favorite of mine was the old abandoned quarries in the area. They were always really cool to stroll through at night. Now I'm just wondering if I really was alone on those walks. Around 10 years ago, my friend was training for the army. I decided to join him every night for fun, and we would wear camo suits and hike through the forest. Every so often we would hear people walking and hide. Many times we had people stop right next to us and talk to each other, completely unaware that two dudes were laying down only a few meters away from them. Made me stop going into the woods alone. Lol. A man took a photo of his family at the exact moment he was gunned down. This happened on New Year's Eve of 2011, and it was very tragic. Not sure if you can consider this scary, but to me, it was and still is. Damn, dude helped solve his own murder. That's some Ace Attorney level shit. 2 engineers died when the windmill they were working on caught fire. This is the last picture of them alive hugging. Wind turbine technician here. This photo is showed in just about every safety training I've had. Along with the story and a video to go with it. It was an electrical fault that caused the fire. The guys in the photo were 19 and 21, which is tragic. 2 more guys were up there, but they managed to get down by going through the smoke, flames. They were older. Here is a link with more info and vids for you guys. I don't have the pictures anymore because it was 10 years ago, but when I was working as a cable installer, a guy working for a different company in Seattle fell off his ladder and impaled himself on the spikes of a fence. I imagine that's still shown in trainings. The scuba diving death of newlywed Tina Watson. This is the photo, warning. Dead body pictured, and this is an earlier comment thread of mine explaining the circumstances. * original comment. What you're seeing is a normal photo of a scuba diver, but in the background you can see another diver behind them booking it for the ocean floor, and on the right-hand side of the image, there's a flat and strangely stiff figure. Tina Watson, about 100 feet underwater, unconscious or likely already dead. Tina was visiting Australia on her honeymoon with her new husband Gabe Watson, also a diver, who convinced her to get certified despite Tina being very nervous and uncomfortable underwater. During an open ocean dive that was far too advanced for her limited experience, Tina experienced an equipment malfunction and drowned. Her husband Gabe is, at best, an arrogant, incompetent, lying piece of shit who exaggerated his abilities as a certified rescue diver and was unable to save his wife when she began exhibiting signs of distress. At worst, he's a cold-blooded murderer who deliberately shut off her air supply until she passed out and then allowed her to drown. He gave 16 differing accounts of the incident, which occurred shortly after he requested that Tina make him her sole life insurance beneficiary. On the advice of her father, Tina didn't change her policy, but she told Gabe that she had. After being charged with Tina's murder, Gabe pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. His sentence was suspended after only 18 months. He is now back in Alabama. Whatever you believe happened beneath the surface, the photograph is chilling. Wikipedia. Dateline, coverage, case file, podcast episode. Aussie here, who learned to dive in Queensland a couple of years after this. This was all everyone was talking about. Instructors and masters were absolutely fucking ropeable at Gabe and called him a stain on the sport. The shit he pulled wasn't just expected of a dive master or rescue dive, such as he supposedly was, but simply of any dive buddy. 33 male. The depth of the asterisk Yongala asterisk and the depth of Tina's body in that pic ain't a fucking onerous depth to get to. It's 10 male shallower than the generally recognized acceptable depth for wreck diving, open circuit, atmospheric air breathing, no overhead cover. You could reasonably grab her and drag her to surface, fill her BCD, mightn't be the safest thing, but it'd work. You know, if you weren't a murderous shitstain. That, and the Tom and Eileen Lonergan thing, which made us all carry whistles and safety sausages, really tightened down dive regulations in QLD. Edit. Safety sausage info. Closing square bracket opening parenthesis / closing parenthesis. Exactly. I got certified 20 years ago, and I remember the outrage in the scuba forums when this case happened. At best, Gabe Watson was a total failure as a dive buddy and a disgrace to diving. But, as much as I tend to assume incompetence over malice, his prior behavior along with the dive circumstances and how he acted after the fact all add up to murder. I'm so appreciative of the local perspective, so thank you for commenting. I can't fathom how damaging this must have been to the local diving community. What a nightmare for everyone involved, except Gabe. Fuck Gabe. Diving in Australia is still on my bucket list. I want to steal one of your awesome leopard sharks and make it my pet. They're my favorite shark species. The final photo of Regina K. Walters, who ran away from home with her boyfriend and they were picked up and murdered by a serial killer. Yep. This is the one I came here to say. This is terrifying. People always talk about serial killers or rapists in these threads, people that act against or tangential to the system. But there's something optimistic about those stories, because the implication is that if the system had the information to identify the offender, they would be brought to justice. What happens when abuse is an intentional act committed by the system? Who do you turn to for safety? Allow me to introduce. Father stares at the hand and foot of his 5-year-old, severed as a punishment for failing to make the daily rubber quota. Belgian Congo, 1904, picture. Leopold II was one of the biggest pieces of shit in the history of ever. The story of Amira Sanchez. The story is chilling, but the photograph will haunt you for life. Seriously, click at your own risk. After a volcano eruption, her legs were trapped underneath rubble, but there was water up to her chest. Rescuers worked for days but couldn't get her out, and eventually everyone including the doctors came to realize there was no way to save her, and even if they removed the rubble it would just sever her legs and she would bleed to death. They had to just let her die where she was. After 3 days, Amira eventually said goodbye to her mother, said she would get some rest, then passed away. Opening square bracket closing parenthesis. That picture will always be burned into my head. This story was in one of my middle school history textbooks around 2006 to 2008. Her eyes why black? Internal bleeding. I remember asking the same thing when I saw this for the first time. I mean, for fear of sounding like a broken record, I would very much not like to be on a prisoner train bound for Amen Goth's Plaszow concentration camp circa 1943. Dude would straight up pick off random prisoners from his office window, or sick his 2 specially trained dogs on prisoners to tear them limb from limb. Fucking sicko. When you're relieved of duty and censured by the SS for cruelty, you know you've got to be a sick fuck. Pictures of the Black Dahlia. Shit's not high definition but it is awfully fucked up. If you look it up, you'll find Elizabeth Short was murdered on Skid Row. Her body was found a day after she was murdered. She was found with a Glasgow smile, her body was severed in half at the hips with all of the blood drained out and the killer communicated with the cops but was never found. Very NSFL. Nope. Not fucking clicking that. Joseph Fritzl, the pictures of the basement where he kept his daughter. The bonkers thing that never gets mentioned is that he apparently also kept his own mother locked up in a separate bricked-up attic, but she died decades before all this. In 1959, after Fritzl had married and bought his house, his mother moved in with them. Over time, their roles reversed, and his mother came to fear him. Eventually, he also admitted he had later locked his mother in the attic and bricked up her window after telling neighbors that she had died, and kept her locked up until her death in 1980. It is unknown how long Fritzl kept his mother locked up in his attic, but newspapers have speculated that it may have been up to 20 years. OMG, the case always creeped me out, but I wasn't aware of him doing the same thing to his mother. Hisashi Aochi. The man was kept alive for 83 days after severe radiation exposure. This one always breaks my heart. He repeatedly asked for them to just kill him, let him die, but either the parents, doctors, or both kept him alive. Poor soul. Exactly. It always disgusts me too that there's always someone who cracks a joke because of his name when they see the photos. It's not funny. This was a real person with a family who suffered unimaginably. Probably Garli building fire in the urban area of Hong Kong during 1996, which took 41 lives. There was TV live that day and there was just one guy who clinged to the window trying to shout for help. But the fire took him and he was burnt to death on live. Later the corpse just kept clinging to the window with fire burning behind him. The mentioned photo. This is the first one I haven't seen before and it's fucking horrible. That fire in the bar where the doors were chained and there was one entrance and exit. The sounds of that video haunt me. The fire grew so fast that dozens died quickly. I don't want to look it up again, but it could have been over 100 dead. Are you referring to the Station Club fire where the band Great White was playing? That was horrific. I saw a show about it and people's accounts were hard to listen to. It's awful. The doors weren't chained, though. What happened was the front entrance was a bit narrow and people panicked, falling down and creating a blockage at the front entrance which would not budge. Sadly, most the people trapped in that pile died. Waking up to a notification on my phone that a ballistic missile was incoming to my state and to seek shelter immediately. Screenshot it and it's the one picture that I was sure to copy onto my computer when my old phone took a swim. I remember that. It was a mistake, but I can't remember the areas affected. Hawaii, I believe. There are a few pictures of Dahmer's apartment, inside of which they found 4 human heads, 7 human skulls, 2 full human skeletons, 3 human torsos in a drum of acid, 2 human hearts. I'm going to hell for reading this as the 12 days of Christmas, I fucking know it. Damn it, I wasn't going to hell until I read your comment and now I am. The story of Thich Quang Duc, a Buddhist monk in Vietnam who set himself on fire with petrol to protest the terrible persecution of Buddhists by the Roman Catholic president Ngo Dinh Diem in the 50s and early 60s. It's one of the most well-known photographs in history. You probably know this picture since it's the cover of Rage Against the Machine's first album. Few years ago a student walking home was mugged and stabbed to death, and it was caught on security camera. The stabbing was bad enough, but what was even more tragic, infuriating was that the victim tried to flag down passing cars for help but not a single one stopped. Eventually he collapsed and died. ______edit. Y'all justifying not stopping to help is ******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* As someone who was jumped, beat up, and left, I tried to get a car to stop to help me while I was bleeding and limping. No one did. I look back and realize I probably looked crazy. Doesn't make it any less sad or tragic in this case though. It was clearly the kind of area you could get jumped and beat up in, so they probably weren't keen on stopping there. Some criminals also fake distress in order to stop cars and hijack them. John Jones in the Nutty Putty Cave always scares me. I'm too terrified to search this, but I sure am curious. Could someone please give me a summary? Guy takes a wrong turn in a cave. Gets stuck upside down. Every effort to retrieve him wedges him in further and tighter. Blood pools in his head over several hours. He's barely coherent, but they give him a radio so he can say goodbye to his family as he dies from lack of blood flow. Oh, thanks for the summary. I just realized why this seemed familiar, literally my worst fear. Just to add, they worked for 28 hours to save him, and despite continued rescue efforts after his death, crews eventually deemed it to be too unsafe to retrieve his body. Later that year, 2009, the cave was permanently sealed to prevent further deaths. Link to the story, if you chose to read more about it. Probably the story of Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, the girls who were lost in the jungle in 2014 and were never found. Their camera, however, was and it had some really strange pictures. There is a subreddit devoted to this case, too. Some of their remains were found. Sad case. Oh, you're right. I forgot about that, but now remember reading about how some of the remains, like a foot in a shoe I guess, were found. Helios Flight 522, also called Ghost Flight, because of a wrongly turned switch there was no pressurization. The pilots couldn't identify the problem, and because of hypoxia everyone on the plane except one died. The disturbing thing is that the plane was on autopilot and simply flew to its destination, only stayed at 30,000 feet. Fighter-jets were scrambled and took a picture. They reported seeing everyone livelessly, but after 2 hours saw one person entering the cockpit, which was a crew member. He tried getting the plane to descend, but after 3 minutes after he entered the cockpit the left engine spun out because of fuel starvation. 7 minutes after that the right engine. Flight data recorded a yoke pull, pitching the plane up, of the maximum amount a human could deliver seconds before impact. The picture taken by the fighter pilots still give the chills. Reddit post, for those interested in the details, provided video gives a good picture. Video. The Lake Nyos disaster. There was an earthquake, eruption that released an unbelievable amount of carbon dioxide from a volcanic lake, and CO2 being heavier than air, it settled over the nearby village. Over 1,700 people asphyxiated to death in a clear blue sky, having no clue what was happening and almost no chance of surviving if they had. I remember horrifying photos of dead livestock covering a field in a high school science textbook. Opening square bracket closing parenthesis. Did you see that video? I think it was Russian, and they throw a bunch of dry ice in an indoor pool, and then a couple of them jump in the foggy pool and realize there's no oxygen? One guy tries to jump out, but he disappeared back into the fog. This just reminded me of a recent video of a sinkhole opening up underneath a pool while people were swimming. Sucked a few people right down into the earth. Hinterkaifeck. On a small farm in Germany in 1922, someone brutally murdered the entire family and their maid, then lived in the house for days after. The killer lured family members to the attic one by one. The daughter was murdered in the barn with a pickaxe, and evidence shows she stayed alive in agony for hours. The father had reported hearing footsteps in the attic in the days leading up to the killings, but could find no one. He also saw footprints in the snow leading to the machine room, where the lock was broken. It took 4 days for the bodies to be discovered, in which time people reported seeing and smelling smoke from the fireplace. The smell was disgusting. It's unknown what was being burned. The previous family maid had quit 6 months before the killings, citing sounds in the attic and claiming the place was haunted. 6 months. To this day, there has been nothing close to a conclusive end to the story. It still haunts me. There are pictures of the bodies online if you look for them. Gruesome stuff. Reminds me of the case in Japan, the Setinaga, very sure I butchered the spelling, apologies, murders. The entire family was murdered, and the killer lived in their house for days, even shitting in the toilet and not flushing it. He still hasn't been caught. Edit. Thanks for the correction, it's Setagaya. Issei Sagawa. He was obsessed with a fellow student while studying in Paris. Her name was Renée Hartevelt and she was of Danish origin. He invited her over to dinner and proceeded to kill her, rape her corpse, mutilate her, and eat some of her body parts. There are pictures of the gruesome death readily available with a quick Google image search. Worst part? He got out of it because insanity, and went back to Japan, where, for a while, he became a pseudo-celebrity and was invited onto shows to tell the story. He was not allowed to attend the funerals of his parents. Edited to include link. He also wrote and illustrated a manga about the murder, which thankfully is no longer in print. The photo of Travis Alexander. He was murdered by his ex-girlfriend. She lured him into taking provocative photos in the shower, and he has such a haunted look in his eyes in the last photo taken during the photo shoot. Edit. He was not lured. Rather, he and his ex-girlfriend had just had sex, and afterwards while he was in the shower, she began taking pictures of him. The police recovered the SD card, and the last photo of him alive is the one I was referencing in this comment. The photos that follow are after she'd killed him. Oh, that crazy bitch Jody. I watched all her interrogation footage and I just can't with her. She could be one of the most aggravating, irritating, annoying humans I've ever seen, heard of. The interview where she gets mad at the news reporter still sticks with me. I never realized you'd be a hater. A hater? Woman, you've killed a man and said ninjas did it. What universe did you think people would like you after that? Exclamation mark.